I'd just like to ask you about TMX. There's a line item in the estimates for about $6.5 million for, it says, quote, funding for the Trans Mountain Expansion project. And so I just wonder if you could explain, given that the Deputy Prime Minister promised that no more tax dollars would go into TMX in February 2022, what that dollar amount is in the estimates.
Sure. So it relates to, and I'm happy to have officials speak to it more fulsomely, but it relates to discharging our obligations to Indigenous peoples with respect to accommodations along the pipeline. Specifically, it's the delivery of 3 of 8 accommodation measures, which are the Terrestrial Studies Initiative, the Aquatic Habitat Restoration Fund, and the Terrestrial Cumulative Effect Initiative.
Minister, I was wondering if you could give a timeline or an update for Canadians on the progress of getting TMX into private sector ownership.
Well, I can certainly say a couple of things. It is, as you know, run by an organization that reports to the Minister of Finance, not to me. But certainly the progress on the construction continues to make good progress, and certainly the intention of the government, as we have said, is to transact to the private sector as we move towards project completion.
I guess the concern is that TMX was supposed to actually be operating in 2019. Of course, your government had frozen the application, extended the timeline, redid Indigenous consultation. The court ruled your Indigenous consultation was insufficient, not a challenge unique to your government, certainly one other governments have faced before. And then again, you gave the green light. The private sector proponent was still willing to spend hundreds of millions of dollars to try to get it built. Your government failed to provide the legal and political certainty that was required for them to go ahead and do that, so you bought it. And we're currently 3 years behind what would have been the private sector timeline for operations. So given your comments about dollars and investments flowing away from projects that, of course, your government has targeted to phase out and minimize. Do you think that's the problem? Has the government made TMX now an asset that no one wants to buy?
Oh, I don't think at all. That's not at all true. Certainly, the Indigenous consultation piece was important. It's actually, the courts have helped to clarify, I think, the bar that needs to be set to achieve for projects moving forward. And that will be of use to all future governments, I think, in that context. Certainly, we would all like to see the project come to fruition. As you know, the government bought the project because of the political uncertainty that was created, in particular because of the position that was taken by the government of British Columbia. And so we have stepped up to ensure this important piece of infrastructure has been done. It is somewhat delayed, and in part because of things like COVID and the floods that happened here in British Columbia.
Turning to the TMX project, I have a few questions with that. Initially, the project was bought from Kinder Morgan for $4.5 billion with a projected expansion cost of $3 billion. That project has increased now to $21 billion. That's a 500% increase in construction costs. I have a very intimate knowledge of the construction industry, especially the heavy construction industry. The costs have not gone up 500%. Can you help me understand where that additional cost is coming in?
I'll turn to my colleague in a minute, but I'd say a couple of things with respect to TMX. We have the progress with respect to the construction of TMX obviously was affected by the COVID pandemic and by some of the other conditions that occurred in BC, in particular during the last period of time. So floods and fires also had an effect on the construction pace. But the construction has continued. We're at around 70% completion right now, and the projection is that this will be completed by Q3 of the next year. And so this has proceeded. I'll maybe turn to Angie Bruce if she wishes to add anything.
No, Deputy, I think that describes exactly it. The only other thing I might add to that is that it also includes the extreme weather events. So the flooding and the wildfires that took place in BC did impact the construction as well.
I appreciate that answer, but a 500% increase, like that's very significant to move from a $3 billion anticipated project cost to $16 billion. Like, yeah, some adverse weather, okay, I understand that, but and carbon tax, I understand that. Fuel is expensive now. It's probably increased by 10-15% over the cost of what they had anticipated, but that's not 500%. Somewhere there's a lot of money that's gone missing.
Sorry, is there a question?
Where's the money? Yeah, that would be the question.
Mr. Chair, I would just say that this has been a very significant piece of construction. It is a very large installation that's occurred. It's happened over a period of time. The work continues. It's come up against some challenges by virtue of the challenges that we all faced in the world. But the work does continue. We're 72% complete.